Welcome to the Peas on Moss podcast.
Welcome to a special episode of the Peas on Moss podcast. I hope you've enjoyed listening to the show so far because we've enjoyed bringing you interviews with chefs and product developers that I've met throughout my career. Through these first 25 episodes, I've learned so much about the technology and art of podcasting, and I've begun exploring the series and how it can serve you and bring you to the back of the house of the world of product development and food manufacturing. I prioritize sharing this side of the food industry with you because it's fairly unknown and a very large part of the food business system. We hear about big food and restaurants in the news often enough, but you don't get to know the individuals who work in food manufacturing. So it sounds like a bit like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. Food manufacturing is more than that, and it's an industry from where you get most of the food in your pantry today. Whether it's sharing the experiences of chefs that I've met personally through Peas on Moss, or featuring culinologists in the Research Chefs Association on the Culinologist podcast, we're seeking to bring you insider information and a peek into the fascinating world and work that it takes to supply the food chain from fields through factories and onto your grocery store shelves. This podcast started as a labor of love, but with all labor, there are expenses. Due to the growing popularity of the series and my running out of web hosting space, we're actually going to spin off the Peas on Moss and Culinologist podcast into two separate shows, each with their own iTunes and Stitcher accounts. And I'll continue hosting both of the shows. In order to do that, though, the podcast costs are doubling and we need listener support. If you've gained any value from this podcast, would you consider personally sponsoring or inquiring of whether your organization would contribute? Just $10 a month from a few sponsors would keep the shows going. You can specify if you want to support the podcasting effort in general, or if you want to support a specific series. We're a young podcast series, and we're filling the niche of information and interviews for those interested in product development, food business entrepreneurship, and culinology. There are only two other podcasts that talk about the careers in food science, and we're the only ones featuring research chefs and the RCA organization. To find out more about advertising, sponsoring, and being a guest on the show, please visit our website, peasonmoss.com.
Today's interview is with Konsantin Zvereff. He's one of the co-founders of BlueCart, a tech startup based in the San Francisco Bay Area that seeks to bring solutions to restaurateurs and chefs in a way to manage their inventory and purchase reordering in a way that really no other program has ever been able to do in the past. Konstantin sat down with us to tell us about the BlueCart system and really how an MBA program and some time in Africa and quite a bit of time on a restaurant line helped him identify and then create a solution for restaurant inventory management. He even credits his mom for helping him out in some of this. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Konstantin, and also check out the BlueCart app at BlueCart.com. The app is actually free for restaurants and for vendors, and they have a couple of other paid programs in addition to the free app if you decide it matches your needs. In addition to providing inventory management programming, the BlueCart team also goes around to culinary programs and teaches about inventory management. So if that's something of interest to you, go to BlueCart.com and reach out to Konstantin directly, and he can set up a program for you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Peas on Moss podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Schaub, and I am here with one of the founders of BlueCart, a startup out of San Francisco. Welcome to the show, Konstantin.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
We're so excited to speak with you because BlueCart, I was actually introduced to BlueCart because I'm really active in social media, and your team did a social media push or an advertisement, and I noticed it because you talk about offering innovative solutions for chefs. And coming from a restaurant background, I tend to want to find out what new technologies and new methods could make being a chef easier. So automatically I was thinking I need to find out who BlueCart is, what they can do, and then share the story with the Peas on Moss audience.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having me. As you can imagine, this is, one of these technologies that has tremendous potential. There are not that many technologies really affecting and improving the back of the house, the heart of the kitchen for restaurants. It's a very sensitive area. It's a very thin margin industry. So anything that touches the heart of the kitchen has to be an airtight solution. So in that sense, it wasn't an easy road, but it's been a fascinating one.
Before we started recording, you gave me probably the most incredible teaser of how BlueCart came to be. So I was hoping that you could also do that for our audience and then elaborate into the full story of the development.
Absolutely. So it's not frequent that um, African rural farmers can influence the direction of a Silicon Valley-based startup, but indeed that was the case, right? BlueCart started about 6 years ago as a grad school project in Georgetown University, where Jag and I, the other co-founder, we were called in for an operations improvement project on a fast casual restaurant group that was growing nationally. And and that's where we realized that there was a very large tangible problem with the procurement of these restaurants, where they were using phone calls, faxes, emails to place their orders to all of their suppliers. So we developed this project there, to streamline the purchasing of these restaurants. Now, what happens is that throughout our grad school experience, we won a number of accolades, business school competitions that you participate in. We were actually flown to international business schools competitions with Georgetown, which was fascinating. But at this point, we had a one-sided marketplace where we had all these like fascinating and excellent business features for the buyers, right? But there was nothing there for suppliers. So upon graduation, what happened is that Jag and I had the opportunity to like launch BlueCart, but we didn't have a solid solution, and we had this like gut feeling that it was not complete. So we decided to really like table the development of BlueCart. I graduated and I went to East Africa, Kenya and Uganda, where I worked with a little bit over 9,400 farmers in very, very, very rural East Africa. And there it became very, very apparent that technology was being used as a way to like keep small farmers out of the supply chain, meaning that these farmers didn't have the ability to aggregate their buying power, they didn't have the ability to aggregate their selling power, and as a result, they were not considered in the overall supply chain of the economy, right? So they were completely carved out, and they, as you can imagine, they had land, they had enormous amounts of labor, right? They had tremendous passion, they were extremely innovative, but they just didn't have access to that information that, the bigger suppliers were literally using technology to carve them out, right? So at that point, it kind of like started hinting us that to Jag and I, that for us to like really succeed in building this platform, right, we had to provide a solution that would benefit both sides of the equation, not just buyers, but suppliers had to have an equally as strong incentive to join BlueCart. So that's when the whole idea of BlueCart really started taking like a very, very, very industry type solution, right? And that's essentially where we started to like develop the platform. After 1 year of me being in Africa, I think that it was in in Africa you have this like roadside markets where these ladies sell their produce, their tomatoes, their onions, right? And I was talking to this lady that was selling like I think it was like 12 tomatoes, right? And I looked at her and I'm like, how do you expect to make a business out of this, right? And she looked at me and she's like, I really have no choice, like this is what I am good at and this is what I'm going to do, right? So, when I saw that, right, I think it was like probably 10 minutes later, I called Jag in the US and I said, Jag, we need to like revisit the BlueCart idea. I think that if this lady, has the passion and motivation to like succeed, we definitely have this type of motivation. So from there on, that's when we started developing BlueCart on nights and weekends for the next 3 years. And July 2014, the platform went live, and that's when we both essentially like moved all back to the US and launched the platform.
Wow, that is really incredible. And I think it's so interesting to hear that while you had a wonderful idea 6 years ago and really gained some great response early, you still needed to kind of vet that out in the marketplace and see, like you said, make sure that this makes sense for both the buyers and the vendors, and make sure that they can adopt the technology and the method and really understand the value that you're bringing. Because that I think can sometimes be a miss for some entrepreneurs, is that the idea and the solution that they're offering is probably the next great big idea, but sometimes not having that time in the market, to prove it out.
I couldn't agree more. Something that I recently heard that really resonated with us, right, is that it's not until you put your product in front of customers that you don't start learning, right? So just to give you an example, like I don't have a tech background, but I developed the first BlueCard app that we actually use, right? And so in that sense, like, it's this the desire to like make sure that you put something in front of customers, see if they would actually use it, see if they would actually, give you feedback, and from there you start learning, right? That first version of what we did obviously was very very basic and just very utilitarian, right? So the app today is very rich, smart in the way that it helps run your business, right? But nonetheless, it's not until you put something in front of your users that you begin to learn.
What's an example of a lesson that you learned? Say you had a solution or say a platform style that you thought, oh, this will be great. The chef and the buyer will absolutely use this. But then actually when your key users started trying to use the product itself, they realized and you realized, okay, this isn't actually the best solution. How did you pivot from that?
There just to give you a sense, that we've made a million of those wrong assumptions, and we're constantly seeking user feedback. The platform is what it is today because of user feedback, and otherwise you can start developing a castle that nobody will use, right? So in that sense, for example, when we launched the platform had a price comparison feature, meaning that we actually enabled buyers to compare the price of lettuce across the industry, right, and purchase from the cheapest one. And within 2 weeks, we actually took that feature down. And we took that feature down for a number of reasons. Number one, nobody was using it. Number two, suppliers had a visceral reaction against this very naturally. I mean, we were essentially creating a race to the bottom, right? Nobody wants to sell the cheapest lettuce. This industry is about relationships. This industry is about the services that I've been providing you for the last 30 years. This industry is about the fact that I'll deliver to you on Saturday or Sunday. This industry is about the quality of the products that I provide, the fact that I help you redesign the menu every quarter, right? So when we realized that restaurateurs and chefs, have very little turnover of their suppliers. They have this very strong supplier relationships. That's when we realized, we got this all wrong, right? This is an industry that is built upon relationships, and our platform needs to be focused on strengthening that relationships as opposed to severing them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So from that point on, that's when we started to realize significant success in customer satisfaction, in user engagement, and we've dramatically steered away from anything that remotely resonates with price comparison.
Yeah, and even with price comparison, somewhat the culture of that is problematic when we're talking about quality in the supply chain, and you're asking for the highest quality of those tomatoes that are offered. And if there's a drive to go for the lowest price or the race to the bottom, you can't always provide the highest quality when you're also trying to be the cheapest.
Exactly.
So yeah, and then that itself is a value proposition, because now I'm buying the highest quality tomatoes that I can access and be proud about serving on my menu.
Exactly, and now through BlueCard, right? Your small farmer can have access to mobile and online ordering and order management without spending a dime, right? So now what we've empowered is these small, high quality suppliers to have the same technology that the big guys have, right? So in BlueCard we have wineries, breweries, spirits, produce, seafood, meats, linens, paper goods. So essentially, the entire scope of what a hospitality industry participant needs on a recurring basis is our target, right? So in that sense, technology is no longer a tool used to prevent competition, but essentially enable this market, this industry. Yeah.
Yeah, very much a platform to see it all. And yeah, from a supplier's perspective, then I'm thinking, okay, I have this artisanal or limited run item, say, and I can push it out there. The people who are active in the BlueCart system then can see it and maybe run it as a special, which allows me to move my inventory as well.
Something fascinating, Kimberly, that we recently realized, right? Is we've been hearing, we don't have a big team, and obviously there's not a big sales team. We have several account managers, but the platform has been growing very, very fast, and this is always through our user base that they become our ambassadors, right? And we've been hearing that BlueCard had all these benefits to these businesses, and we couldn't really, quantify this, right? Like we had to move away from this anecdotal evidence and really put a number tag on this, what is the impact that BlueCard is having on these businesses? So we decided to survey our entire user base and non-BlueCard users. We surveyed well over 12,000 restaurant owners. And the results were absolutely fascinating. We realized that BlueCard actually halves the food waste of these professional kitchens. And that was mind-blowing to us. Like, how is this happening, right? And then we had to launch a kind of like a research project to really understand why is this happening. And what's happening is that these buyers and sellers are running with much leaner inventories because they don't have to stack like 4 or 5 cases of tomatoes to run their entire operations through the entire week, right? They can have ease of communication with their suppliers and let them know on an ongoing basis what their food needs are, as opposed to having to wait until Sunday when I communicate with you, right? So we see that people are running with leaner inventories. They waste less food. There's less perishability, right? There's ease of communication, and as a result, products that these restaurants are serving are much fresher, right? Because they're able to access these from their suppliers on a much frequently basis. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Isn't that fascinating?
So yeah, and I'm wondering, and I'm thinking of the times that I've received deliveries and have had to check that off from a printed inventory, delivery sheet. And how that would compare if I actually had access to the original orders, which are usually, at least in my experience at smaller restaurants, the chef would carry around, a pocket notebook, scribble a couple of things on there, walk into the walk-in. A couple of us prep cooks would add an item or two to the list, and then he would kind of go through and guess how much of a product is needed after, a cursory walkthrough and the walk-in. And then I think he would leave a message with the vendor after hours. And I was always like, well, what happens if the voicemail hangs up before you're finished? But I'm wondering too, if you could walk us through, say, the chef's side of it. What does the restaurant's side of the platform look like? And then what does the vendor's side of the platform sort of look like? Without the, opportunity of videos in front of us, but
Of course. But and just to give you a peace of mind, so you don't hold this against your chef, 90% of the restaurants today are operating in that manner, right?
oh, absolutely.
So in that sense, that's why BlueCard is having the impact that's having on these restaurant owners. So what happens is that everybody in BlueCard in that restaurant, right, has access to their BlueCard account. As these restaurants operate, they can start adding to the BlueCard cart, and the different users build their cart independent of the suppliers that provide those products, right? So you can have one of your sous chefs doing inventory in the walk-in kitchen, right? and just essentially doing their inventory. And in the background, a predictive cart is being built based on your par levels. So you don't have to like guess. Your chef or GM has already like establish what is the minimum threshold that you need to like have for those days of the week. And as you're doing your inventory, that's being built. In addition to that, you have people like checking in on what those orders are. And when you're ready to like start firing those orders, you essentially press up and those orders are all sent out to all your suppliers. The moment your suppliers receive those orders, the order status in essentially your BlueCart accounts change from like sent to received, yes? The moment that your suppliers open those orders through email or through their BlueCart apps, right, that order changes to seen, right? So you're getting all this information from your order that before was implied. I hope they got that order, like you mentioned, right? Like now we have an electronic record that order has been sent, that order has been received, that order has been seen, without pretty much any engagement at this point from the supplier. From that point, the supplier can actually modify the order based on whatever the pick ticket amounts are, or if they substitute goods, right? You as a buyer are immediately notified that those changes have been made to your order. That order comes in through the back of the kitchen and you have an order check-in. So essentially you can bring up that order, see what was ordered originally, see how that order was modified, make appropriate changes, and that information essentially becomes your invoice, right? That can be actually paid. And there's an electronic record of that order throughout the entire life cycle, right? So you don't have to like guess who checked in that order, who placed that order, how was this order modified, what was actually delivered. All that is now in essentially a seamless process with electronic records of every step of the way.
So how technologically inclined do the general manager, chef have to be in order to work well with this program?
This is a key question. So, to give you a sense, when we were developing the BlueCart app, we had to make sure that my mom was able to place an order through BlueCart, and my mom does not have a Facebook page. So you can imagine, we had to make sure that this platform was extremely easy to use, otherwise it would not have a chance to succeed, right? So, and it wasn't easy because my mom could not place an order on the first two versions of the app. But finally she could start, she understood, that adding quantities, finding a product, enter the quantity and hit save, that essentially built your cart. So at this point, the BlueCart platform is extremely easy to use. It's much easier than using, for example, Amazon, right? Because like in Amazon, you have to like discover products, right? In BlueCart, those products that you see are the products that you're familiar with, right? So it's a much more friendlier user experience that you would anticipate.
Oh, that's wonderful. Your mom's a good sport.
Yeah, she suffered a lot.
Yeah, I mean, some of that I'm wondering at 2:30 in the morning, how clearly does a GM or a chef or, the lead really think effectively? I know I was not at my sharpest at that time of the night. So that's good.
Well, to that point, right? So when we did this study, surveying our user non-users, we see an 82% reduction in the number of return orders. So as and that's hitting that point that you just made, right? Like, in this industry, there's people with accents like mine, right? Who place orders late at night on very beat up voice machines, right? So trying to interpret those and making sense out of those is very, very complex. Now, when you digitize that and you remove transcription translation errors, right? Then you start bringing efficiencies into the equation and removing tremendous amount of error. So an 82% decrease in the number of return orders, and that's a very tangible cost savings for suppliers.
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, that's huge. I'm thinking again just of the short time that I spent on the line. I definitely remember having to send product back, or we had to 86 an item on the menu because of an ingredient being missing, or not being correct. So, okay, so I'm looking at a screenshot of a couple of the different platforms that you have. It looks like you have a smartphone, and a computer desktop version of both, yeah?
Yes, so essentially what we do is we have the mobile apps. We have two sets of products. One are for buyers, the restaurants, hotels, retailers, and the other one are for the suppliers. For the buyers, what we have is the mobile product, which enables them to like essentially work and use BlueCart on the go, right? And then we have the web product, which enables them to run like analytics, reports, and much more like a richer environment to start understanding ordering patterns, negotiate pricing with their suppliers, build reports, and things of that nature, right? And now from the supplier side, what we've done is essentially done exactly the same. You have a web-based product, which enables managers, owners of these suppliers to like run their business, their order management and fulfillment platform. And then we've built a set of like sales rep mobile apps so that the sales rep that work for these suppliers have a sales tool companion, a way to like capture orders as they're like walking through the street, as they visit their clients. They can modify, add products, create accounts, build carts for their buyers, and things of that nature that before they would have to do on paper and pencil and input into a third-party system, always introducing error into that process, right? So today you have sales rep in the hospitality industry that wake up in the morning, log into their BlueCard account, go into their CRM that we've built for them, and they can see the restaurants that have missed their order frequency that day, right? So instead of like, unknowingly like visiting all their clients, now they can be very strategic and visit those clients that have missed their order frequency and focusing on growing their book of clients as opposed to just managing an order collection exercise, yeah?
So, how does this interface with some of the bigger vendors right now? There are some well-known food delivering companies that probably have a platform that they've been using for years and years, probably since the dawn of computers. How did that interface with those bigger brands and not, make it feel like you're asking them not to use a major part of their own technology?
Well, a couple of things, right? So some of them are already working with us, some of them are yet not. But and we've seen this dynamics replicate a couple of times. If you can imagine, if every single supplier in the industry develops their own mobile ordering platform or their own web ordering platform, what they're doing is they're replicating today's problem in a different technology. Because as a buyer, you're still going to have to download 17 different apps to place 17 different products, and ultimately you have no idea of what your inventory levels are, your part levels are. You can't do a predictive order. You have to like map every product in your inventory to a supplier right in your head and make sure that you remember that Parmesan cheese is supplied by that supplier, as opposed to like just, having that on BlueCart where everything's already mapped for you, right? So what BlueCart does, it anticipates where the industry needs to be tomorrow, right? The industry tomorrow does not need a mobile app for each one of your suppliers. That is ludicrous, right? Like what we do is we aggregate your entire inventory into a centralized platform and connect each one of your inventory items with your suppliers, right? So we've seen time and time and again, many of these suppliers who have attempted to develop their own mobile app have one by one abandoned that effort and saved money in doing so, as you can imagine.
Wow, that is fantastic. So I want to go back to kind of the business owner and entrepreneurship perspective of this as well. You talked about kind of the genesis of the idea and how you've been able to road test it and really get the user experience dialed in. What was it about your MBA program that made you even look at this program to start with, or to develop a solution business?
Let me see. I think one, we had a great professor that understood that that you need to be exposed to real business cases. You need to be exposed to live environments that kind of like trying to build your education based on books and case studies is not always as useful as it could be, right? Like I think 1 year after my MBA program, I probably learned 10 times more than what I learned during the entire MBA program, right? So in that sense, it's when you start having that practical experience is that what helps. And what was particularly useful is that in that particular operations class, they forced us to essentially work in the field, interact with real companies, and try to apply that knowledge that was taught to us in the field.
And why did you choose the restaurant industry?
Well, both Jag and I, we both had restaurant experience. I was an expediter, and I don't know if you're familiar with that position, but it's probably the most dangerous position in the world because chefs throw knives at you, right? And the wait staff are constantly like screaming at you, wondering where their food is, right? So you're that liaison. So when we found the opportunity to like jump onto a hospitality-based operations program, we immediately jumped on it.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Expo specifically is a what is it? It's
As a traffic director, right?
yeah, you definitely get beat up a lot on all sides. So more power to you on that. You're right though, that kind of being in the heart of it does allow you to see possibly where those pinch points are, and then with your program to really think about a solution at one of the more painful pinch points. That completely makes sense.
Completely agree.
So when you started coming up with this idea and you and Jag thought, hey, here's a pinch point, here's a potential solution, what was the initial reaction, say, of your professor or some of your colleagues in the program? Were they thinking, you guys are trying to revolutionize an industry that's been in business for hundreds and hundreds of years? Or were they initially so excited about it as well?
Oh no, the reaction by most people was that if it doesn't exist, it's for a reason. So as opposed to like trying to understand why and how does this industry work, what are the ins and outs of these relationships that need to be streamlined and where are the opportunities for enhancement, right? So initially, especially by peer students, right? It was not the best. It's you have to have certain level of determination to be an entrepreneur, as you can imagine, to believe in yourself, believe in what you're doing. And I think that in our particular case is the fact that it's two of us, that we leaned on each other significantly, that we were actually able to pull this through. Because you being an entrepreneur, and especially a food entrepreneur, is incredibly difficult, right? The ups and downs are extreme, right? So in that sense, having somebody that you can lean on has been, it's one of the big reasons of our success for sure.
So what are you excited for the future of BlueCart once you get, say, more market saturation?
So absolutely. So number one, we need to make sure that anybody who is remotely thinking about developing their own e-commerce platform, developing their own mobile platform, needs to take a look at BlueCart. That's our biggest nightmare, essentially knowing that somebody just spent $25, $50, $100,000 developing their own mobile app. I mean, it's just insane that somebody would actually do something like that, right? Knowing that we exist and we fulfill that need, right? So that's something that we're targeting very much. And now what we're working on is essentially building this like smart kitchen. The smart kitchen is like, the ability of a chef, a general manager, to have access to the performance of his kitchen on a live basis. So, today, restaurant managers operate with a set of information, and they manage that the best way they can, meaning that, you have 300 different items in your kitchen that are provided by different suppliers, right? You know the cost of those items, but that cost changes almost on a daily basis, right? And yet your menu, the pricing on your menu changes once a quarter or once a season, right? So as a result, your menu is not responsive or not as responsive as it should be to changes in the industry. And not just changes in the industry, but changes in your own kitchen, changes in how your inventory flows, changes in how the demand for different products happens in your restaurant, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to empower chefs, restaurant owners to have live access to their own data so that they can respond to changes in their environment on an immediate basis, yeah? And we call that the smart kitchen.
Okay, I'm sure that there are several listeners who are wondering how in the world they can get in touch with BlueCart and with you, ask you questions, maybe give the program a road test. How can we get in touch with you and BlueCart?
Absolutely. So just to make it very clear, all of your listeners will be able to enjoy BlueCart at no cost. Buyers and sellers do not pay for BlueCart unless they want to like sign up for premium services like inventory management and things like that. But essentially, BlueCart is free. So they can just come to bluecart.com, create an account, and it's very, very easy. There's a live chat feature. If somebody has any trouble creating an account with BlueCart, they can very obviously like test it out. If they don't like it, there's no commitments. They won't have to upload a credit card or anything like that. So they can start trying it out, and they will definitely enjoy it. They can get a hold of me at any point. It's at kz@bluecart.com, and I'll get those emails right away.
Oh, wonderful. And then how can I at Peas on Moss help you?
Well, spreading the word, like I mentioned, what keeps us up at night is knowing that somebody's spending unnecessary funds developing their own mobile app or web portal, right? So if you go, to some of our suppliers' websites, you will see that they have BlueCart
check out the website,
there's no need for anybody to spend a
You can also
dime
find us on Facebook,
on
Twitter,
their
Instagram,
infrastructure
and Snapchat.
or mobile
Want more
ordering
information about
technology
Research
when
Chef
BlueCart
work?
exists.
Listen
right?
to the
So spreading the
Culinologist
word
series
and
on
giving
Peas on
people
Moss.
access to
If you liked
BlueCart
what we're
and
doing,
sharing
please
BlueCart
rate and
with
review
your
us on
peers,
iTunes
your
or Stitcher,
friends
and please
is
share the
our
show with your
topmost
friends.
priority.
Special thanks
Thank
to
you very
Joshua
much for
Schaub
your
for
contact
editing and
information. We'll
providing the
definitely
theme
be able
music.
to share that, and
Peas
I'll
on
put that
Moss,
into the
because
show
mise
notes
en
as
place
well.
makes me sound like I
So
have it all together.
the link will be there. All you have to do is click on it. If I can ask a prying question, how do you make money if the app is free?
Absolutely. So we make money through two different ways. Just like LinkedIn, our core product is absolutely free, and we monetize through sponsored content, where brands like Square, National Restaurant Association might use our platform to present content to our user base. These are non-intrusive ads, so essentially they're presented at the dashboard. Once you move away from the dashboard, they disappear. But that's how we monetize our free user base. And two, if you sign up for premium services, there's a subscription model on top of that.
It's an excellent way to kind of ease a chef into a program, get win the hearts and souls of the folks that need to use it every day, and then they can realize some of the other services, the premium services that you mentioned above those. That's great.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Well, folks, that is BlueCart. Thank you so much for joining us today. Konsantin, I really appreciate you explaining kind of the genesis of BlueCart and the solution that you're offering. You're absolutely right. Just because it didn't exist before doesn't mean there wasn't a need.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure, and look forward to staying in touch.